Dive in the deep end, it's time to defend your movie.
Hello, friends, and welcome to today's episode of Defending Your Movie. I am your host, Jeremy Meyer. So this is a really fun episode that I have for you today. Today, my guest is Seth Decker, who is one of the co-founders of the Film Rescue podcast, which I have already mentioned multiple times during the course of doing this show, because a lot of my guests have come from the Film Rescue and Montressor Media group of friends. They have a Discord that they invited me into when I first guested on their show, and I've gotten to meet a lot of really great people through that. But Seth has been a good friend ever since I met him, and since they brought me on to the show. I've always had a lot of fun with those guys, and Seth is actually, as of the recording of this intro, has already guested on multiple episodes of the show, so that'll be coming up in the future. But this was our first one, and it was a movie that there seemed to be a campaign against it over the last few years of, hey, this movie's not as good as you remember it was because you were a kid and you didn't know any better. But today we are talking about the Spielberg film, Steven Spielberg, that is, Hook, the Peter Pan-based film, and we have a really fun discussion about it. But what I think is actually interesting is what we uncover in the middle of our discussion of kind of the reception of this movie at the time and the way it like oddly parallels movie criticism today. So I think you're going to have a lot of fun with it. So without further ado, let's get our plugs and all of that stuff right out of the way. So as usual, you can follow all of our social medias, Twitter and Instagram, at Defending Movie. You can hit up our merch store at belowthecollar.com/defendingyourmovie. And more importantly, you can hit up our Patreon at patreon.com/defendingmovie. We have film commentaries, some special behind-the-scenes videos of some editing that I've been doing, some movie editing, and possibly going to be more of that coming up in the future as there's some new movie prospects for editing that I want to get into. So be sure to check that out. We have a tier as low as $1 if you just want to help out the show, and that'll get you just access to some fun stuff. But without further ado, let us get into our discussion of Steven Spielberg's Hook. So I don't know if you picked up on this like a year or two ago there, and this seems to happen with movies from our childhood quite often, but there was like a Twitter campaign going around of people being like, hey, Hook's not as good as you remember. And I had a lot of friends who were like very upset about that.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, this is the first time I have seen this movie maybe since I was 10 years old.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah, like I saw it a lot as a kid, and honestly, Peter Pan as well. And the Disney Peter Pan was like one of the only VHS tapes I owned as a kid. So like I was like that, and like Aladdin I watched on repeat. And I think Peter Pan was one of those movies that was one of the first movies I got tired of just because of how many times I saw it.
Oh, sure.
Just because, it's not as like fun as like Aladdin was. So that one ended up like grabbing me more.
Totally.
But I always remembered Hook of like, oh, it totally feels like a sequel to that old like Peter Pan movie, like the Disney animated one.
Yeah.
And that's kind of some of my favorite stuff about it, even though I don't remember a lot of it. Like watching it again, I was like, I still feel some of the like love and appreciation relating to that like original movie.
Yeah, definitely. My relationship to this is fairly similar. I was probably I don't know how old you are. I'm turning 30 in 24 days.
I'm turning 33 in less than 24 days.
Are you a Gemini or a Cancer?
A Cancer.
Oh, this is why we get along so well. No, that's so funny. Same, school class essentially for you and I. So I was probably, if you were 11, I was probably like 9 the first time I saw this, probably around the same time, like late 90s, early 2000s. It came out the year I was born, so I know I didn't see it initially.
What year did this come out? I didn't know. Oh, 91.
1991. Yep.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, it was a couple years before, or I was a couple years before.
Yeah, this was 6 months after Terminator 2.
That's crazy. Yeah, I didn't even look at the time when I like just started watching. I didn't even think about what year it came out.
Yeah, yeah, an interesting amalgamation of like where Spielberg was heading at that time, where Robin Williams was heading at that time. Just the whole thing's kind of all over the place, which is why I've learned to love it again in my adulthood. But yeah, same story. Initially, when I got into it, I saw the VHS at a friend's house. I can literally remember the room and TV we watched it on, and it was the first time I ever asked to borrow something from a friend, because I was like, could we borrow this movie? Because I want to watch it a bunch more.
Yeah, similar for me in that I saw this at my babysitter's house. There was like a woman in our town. I lived in a very small town, and there was like a woman in our town who watched like 6 or 7 neighborhood kids. She basically just like nannied all day.
Yeah.
And this was one of the movies they had, so we'd watch it a lot there. And yeah, and then I had Peter Pan at home, so it was kind of like bouncing back and forth between those two movies.
Yeah, exactly. I think the thing that grabbed me as a kid was always going to be the Lost Boys stuff.
Oh, it's still really fun.
Yeah, yeah. All of that is like the highlights of the movie for me. I hadn't watched it in a while either, and I remembered that Twitter campaign you were talking about, because I never knew what this movie was rated.
That's something to talk about.
Yeah, or scaled for, or whatever you want to call it, the Rotten Tomatoes score. I never knew. And so my assumption as I got into movies was, well, it's Spielberg, so it's at least more than 50%.
Yeah. What do we know what it actually is sitting at?
It is 29%.
Oof. Which I think that's too low. I will say that this is definitely like one of my lesser Spielberg movies. And I maybe haven't even like seen as many Spielberg movies as most people. Like I haven't seen anything he's done in like probably the last decade. Like any like his more recent films. And a lot of his earlier stuff, like maybe, but like the big ones I've obviously seen.
Yeah.
But like it feels like a Spielberg movie, but it definitely doesn't feel as tight as some of his other movies do. There's definitely a couple moments where, like specifically the moment that jumped out to me watching it, I watched it yesterday, was when he first kind of like encounters, it was where he learns to fly.
Oh,
He's in his like kind of suit that he's been wearing the whole movie, and then all of a sudden he's just like in the air in the Peter Pan outfit, and there's kind of no transition.
yeah.
Oh, and yeah, actually, there was one where he meets the Lost Boys. It's where he falls off the boat with Captain Hook, and then like Tinkerbell is there, and then he falls in with the mermaids, and they pull him out of the water, and then he shows up at the Lost Boys village, and like Tinkerbell's just hanging out there sleeping. Yeah, and it felt like only like a couple minutes had passed, but it seems like hours at that point.
Yeah. I would list that as a positive, because the movie is all about the fluctuations in time. Because to Captain Hook, Peter Pan hasn't been gone that long. He's been gone long enough for him to like get a pirate army together to have a war with the Lost Boys, but he's shocked by the fact that Peter's an adult when they come back. So I think fluctuations in time is kind of part of the forgiveness here. And
they also talk about how like being in Neverland, like you forget things and stuff like that. Like
exactly,
Neverland just kind of does something weird to you.
Yeah, Neverland is like the perfect metaphor for movie magic, where like editing and time are kind of interlinked, and props and sets and powers are kind of interlinked. And I've always found it interesting for that end. I don't want to jump into my thesis too early, but my big defense of this movie is the whole movie looks like it's done on sets.
Yeah, it does. And it has a very Spielbergian like feel because of that.
Yeah.
Like, I love the pirates, like that little town area with the ship.
Yes.
Like that whole area is awesome.
And all of that set stuff is there because Spielberg's vision for this movie was to do a movie of the stage play.
which I didn't know it was a play until like today.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a book initially. The book's brought up in the movie. So the movie's kind of meta. I appreciate that. But then, yeah, when they get to Neverland, it's all everything in Neverland is sets. There's no real locations ever.
Yeah. I had watched a YouTube video a while ago on this movie, and it was something I just like randomly came across. And it's one of these like, oh, what happened to this movie kind of YouTube videos.
Yeah.
And like I had heard, it was the first time I heard this, that the whole movie was originally being brought up as like a musical.
Yeah.
And that they had full on music numbers like written. And then at the last minute, Spielberg kind of choked and decided, oh, no, we'll just do it as like a regular movie. And apparently it's one of his like biggest regrets that he didn't just do it.
And now if the West Side Story remake is starting to make more sense to you, that's why.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really love the set aspect. Every set I would love to just, if there was a captured moment in time that I could visit the sets that they made, the Pirate Bay and the Lost Boys area, or all the Lost Boys area, really, because they did a lot of different sets for the Lost Boys.
Yeah, and that area seems pretty large. Like they spend a lot of time there.
Yeah.
I mean, between you got the scene where they're all just kind of like beating them up and trying to train them, and then where they're eating, and then like they're skateboarding in certain places. Like there's a lot going on there.
Yeah. I visually, I think maybe that's why I gravitate towards this movie so hard, is because no two scenes look the same.
Yeah.
We're plodding on through Neverland in every single scene that happens. You're getting basically the entire experience except for the Native Americans from the island, which thankfully Spielberg recognized as being racist in 1991 and just kind of excised that whole thing.
Yeah. And that definitely came up in my head, because honestly, this movie comes up at work in a weird way a lot with like me and my coworkers. Is we do the Rufio chant like all the time, which, you know, when I was a kid, Rufio was the coolest person I'd ever seen.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh, he's got that cool hair. Everybody's chanting his name, and he's just kind of like the one in charge.
Very, very early Asian American representation. Charlie Korsmo is, I feel like he never got his due. He peaked in Hook, and then no one ever hired him for anything major again. And I think that's a big loss, because his character not only was invented for this movie, but inspired a band called Rufio, which I got the once in a lifetime opportunity to do a couple shows with back in 2015. And the band Rufio is exactly what you would assume Lost Boys Coming to America would have made as a band.
That's amazing.
It's perfect. I'm glad you brought him up, because Rufio's like a giant highlight, and his death,
which I was so surprised they kill a kid in this movie.
They kill a kid.
I
also
fucking couldn't believe that. I did not remember that at all.
I don't know if this is 100% accurate, but memory wise, that is the first on-screen main character death that I recall as a kid, because it still guts me to this day.
Yeah.
And his last words, I could cry every time.
Oh God. That kind of really threw me off. And like, that was like, oh wait, what is this movie rated? When I was watching it, I could not believe that. And like the fact that the movie is PG and not PG-13 kind of surprised me.
Yeah, well, because it's swashbuckling violence, but it's not ugly violence.
And there's a lot of death, like kind of nonchalantly thrown in this movie. Pirates are getting shot all the time. Rufio gets stabbed in the chest, and this is all happening in front of his small children.
Oh yeah,
like the scene where they're playing baseball and the dude's stealing the base and he just shoots him.
Bad form.
Yeah. Dustin Hoffman just like makes this movie for me.
Oh, Dustin Hoffman.
And Bob Hoskins.
Yeah, Bob Hoskins as well. This is the rare performance where everyone around Robin Williams is outshining Robin Williams.
Yeah, it's very strange. I mean, he wasn't like Robin Williams at this point yet. He had done some big movies like his 80s stuff, Dead Poet Society and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But he wasn't like Aladdin, Mrs. Doubtfire Robin Williams yet.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see him kind of subdued for most of the movie until he becomes Peter Pan in the last like half hour, 45 minutes.
Well, and all the Robin Williams references go to other characters. Bob Hoskins does the Good Morning Vietnam bit for Good Morning Neverland.
Yeah.
Robin Williams doesn't do it. What an interesting choice.
Yeah, it's really strange. You're watching a 90s movie with Robin Williams, like, oh yeah, I know exactly what I'm gonna see, and it's not that at all.
Right. So I tweeted this the other night while I was watching it. The impetus to this podcast was Jeremy's floating this wonderful idea for a show where it's basically the opposite of the show that I run, which is shit on movies. You're defend bad movies. I love that idea. And going into it, I was like, well, I'm going to do all my due research. And it led me on this like Twitter rant about the movie.
I did not see this.
Do you mind if I read it out real quick?
No, go ahead.
So it's a total of 4 tweets. I started with pitching the movie as if it should be good, but then recognizing that it got bad reviews. So this is what I said. A Spielberg directed, Kathleen Kennedy produced, John Williams scored film based on a classical stage play starring Robin Williams, Dustin Hoffman, and co-starring Julia Roberts, Bob Hoskins, and Maggie Smith. And this movie gets 29% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's still so low.
It's too low. Like, I'm not saying this is 100%er.
No, absolutely not. But
29% is aggressively
50,
bad.
Yeah, sub 50 seems weird to me.
So I continue. It has cameos by Glenn Close, Phil Collins, and Carrie Fisher. I don't know if you caught all of those.
No, where's Carrie Fisher?
So Carrie Fisher is the woman kissing the guy on the bridge when they leave for Neverland.
Oh, okay.
Phil Collins is the detective in One Shot.
I saw that one when I was looking up the cast list, so I knew that.
And then Glenn Close is the pirate that gets put in the boo-boo box.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah, she plays a dude pirate with a beard.
Oh my God. I think I had heard that before now that you say that out loud, but that blows me away. Because it's
so unassuming.
And it's like she's in the forefront of this picture because the whole point is in that scene, he's like chastising that pirate in front of Robin Williams.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
And that's Glenn Close. So the finality of the tweets was the Ebert and Roper quote. They gave this movie 2 out of 5 stars, which is again still too low.
Yeah.
And the quote that I grabbed was, "The lack of creativity in the screenplay is dramatized in the sword fighting sequences between Hook and Peter, which are endless and not particularly well choreographed."
Did they watch the same movie?
That's exactly what I said.
I thought the sword fighting was actually pretty good.
Not only is the sword fighting good, Peter and Hook only fight one time.
Yeah, and like there's only one big fight at the end. I can't think of any other moment where there's like more sword fighting in the movie.
Yeah, like the training sequence with Rufio has the first pulled sword of the movie.
And even that is like somebody just gets their pants cut. Like,
yeah.
What?
So for them to call the sword fights endless, what?
That is ridiculous. Like, I have never put much stock into the whole Ebert and Roper thing. Like, I will look at their opinions just to be curious. Like, oh, like at the time, what was this movie like looked at?
Yeah.
But like, we live in an age where everybody with a Twitter account is a critic. And I was a critic for a short time. Like I wrote reviews for websites and stuff. And like, you got to find someone who has who kind of looks at movies the way you do is the way I look at it. Is like, you just want to find someone who has similar sensibilities. So, you know, if they like something, you might like it too, or vice versa.
Totally.
Like, but like they were just the authority back then, and it should never be that way.
I mean, they said that Star Wars was gonna be a flop. So
Yeah.
put as much stock in them as you want. I think my main idea is the harshness on Hook needs to leave. At least give it like a clean slate to run from, regardless of if you're going to hate it or not. I don't really care. Like, people not liking the movies I like is fine. I have no
Yeah.
issues with that. But a movie like this that came out at that time in the way that it did, to get a 29%, that's aggressively harsh.
Yeah, and I do wonder where that comes from. I mean, obviously Spielberg wasn't like the Jurassic Park guy yet, but he was already the Indiana Jones guy. Like,
Yeah.
people would definitely be interested in what he's got going on. And, Robin Williams is no slouch at this point. I don't know where Dustin Hoffman was at this point, but I mean, these are all big names, a big director, like something that should bring attention. Maybe that was a problem, is expectations of all these top talents, and it just wasn't like 100% knock it out of the park.
Yeah.
But like, I was definitely like nervous going in of like, oh, is this going to be boring? I haven't seen it in a long time, but it's not. It's not like a movie I would love or revisit a lot, but I still think it's fun and enjoyable. And especially it is like a kid's film, but it's something I think adults can enjoy too, especially if you grew up with some of this stuff.
Yeah, I make the distinction sometimes in regards to movies like this, where there's a difference between kids' films and family films. And I think this lands in the family film territory. And what I mean by that is that, like, a family film can push towards PG-13. You can have violence, you can have innuendo, you can have, basically the idea is, can grandpa to 5-year-old enjoy this movie? If yes, it's a family film. If it's geared towards kids, I think of like Despicable Me and the Minions stuff and things like that. That's a kid's movie. It's not really meant for adults to watch and critique. Whereas Hook, I think, is meant to be watched and critiqued by generations.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it is interesting because, like we were saying, we grew up with the original Peter Pan.
Yeah.
And, I think watching this now older, it's hitting us different than even when we were kids.
Oh, totally.
And like, as a kid, we enjoyed it because kids enjoy everything, like I very rarely do you watch a movie as a kid and you're just like, oh, that was bad. Like, it's usually when you get older and you start realizing that.
Right.
But like, again, we would have watched this as kids, and then watching it now, like, we can recognize the problems, but there's going to be a little bit of that nostalgia. But I think it holds up. Like, there are elements of it I think are really fun. One thing I liked, like a small detail, is when Peter Pan learns to fly and he's flying back into Neverland, and you see underneath the water just like the map compass directions like you would on a map, and it's just like, that's goofy and interesting, and like they didn't need to do that, but it gives it like a nice look.
Yeah, it's a very well realized film visually. I also I know this got like put up for Academy Awards. I don't know what all for, but if costume design wasn't part of it, I'd be shocked.
I have the Wikipedia open. It was nominated for 5. Best art direction, which it lost to Bugsy. Best costume design, which it lost to Bugsy. Best visual effects, which it lost to Terminator 2. But best makeup also lost to Terminator 2. And best original song, which it lost to Beauty and the Beast. So lost to some heavy hitters there. But
it's funny. We just did a episode of Terminator 2 on Palette Cleanser. So I had just familiarized myself with the 64th Academy Awards. For some reason, Hook just never showed up on my radar because I was floored by Silence of the Lambs, Terminator 2, and Beauty and the Beast being the same year. And then the ones losing are like Thelma and Louise, JFK, and Bugsy.
That's pretty crazy.
What a crazy year for movies.
That's huge. Yeah, I'm actually looking at this now. Like, City Slickers won an award.
Undiscovered Country came out that year too.
Jesus.
And Fisher King. I didn't know he did 2 movies that year. That's another Robin Williams movie.
Yeah, man.
Maybe that's why he's more subdued in this movie. I wanted to bring that up. This isn't the first version of Robin Williams trying to be a dramatic actor, but
no.
if you pitched the beginning version of his character, it doesn't feel like Robin Williams at all.
Not even a little bit. And I'm trying to think like what is the first like Robin Williams, and I think it's, well, no, I guess it'd be Aladdin, even though it's an animated movie. I'm like, what is the first Robin Williams movie that gives us the Robin Williams that we think of today? And Aladdin was 92 and Mrs. Doubtfire was 93. And I think it's probably those two.
Yeah. Good Morning Vietnam is like probably the most Robin Williams that he's ever been. Because that is like his full manic comedy.
Is he that crazy in that movie? It's been a while since I've seen that. I guess I remember him being, I always remember the ending of that movie more, where it gets a little more serious.
He is that crazy on the radio. Off the radio, he's very normal because he's a pretty serious actor overall. Like Popeye, yeah. I think Popeye was his first comedy role, and that's like, I think
1980.
Like the second movie he ever did. But yeah, to what you're saying, I think like Aladdin, Mrs. Doubtfire, Jumanji, those all came out within like 4 years of each other, and that's
the stuff we remember as kids.
Exactly. And then, but even shortly after that, you had like Good Will Hunting,
which is my favorite, like bar none, my favorite Robin Williams movie. He's so good.
Really? That's your favorite?
I love Aladdin, but like Good Will Hunting is just a fantastic movie, and just I will always love that scene where he's just chastising him on the park bench.
Have you ever seen Jacob the Liar?
No.
That's my like bar none. This was Robin Williams the whole time. We just didn't know it. He plays a Jewish person in a internment camp.
Oh wow!
It's it is like fresh off the heels of Schindler List, like kind of movie. It is doing the exact same things, but it's insane. I've
never even heard of that one.
Yeah, I forgot he was in Insomnia too. He plays a serial killer. Robin Williams
and 1 Hour Photo.
Yeah, he got pigeonholed as a comedian, and he's not.
But you know what came out in between those two movies is Death to Smoochie.
I just saw that this year.
Oh my god, it's so good.
I tend to do this thing where I grab a director and go through their filmography. Lately I've been doing Charlie Kaufman. Danny DeVito was my last one because I finished or I caught up on It's Always Sunny.
I did not even know Danny DeVito directed that movie.
Danny DeVito directed Death to Smoochie.
Oh my god.
Danny DeVito's directing style is fucking dark. Can I cuss on this? I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Let me throw out some of his directorial movies. The Ratings Game, The War of Roses, Throw Mama from the Train. He did, as a director, he did Death to Smoochie in the 2000s. His whole thing is like dark satire.
Yeah. That's great though.
I love that about him. We're a little off topic, but
yeah, it's all Robin Williams related.
Well, your fault for bringing Seth onto your show and thinking that you're going to get
wherever it goes,
one idea off of it. So summation of this section was Robin Williams got pigeonholed, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I guess because of the nature of the story of it's a dad who's neglecting his kids, and he has to find his youth again. He is just really stuffy in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know how you make it not that is the thing. It's like it kind of has to be for the story.
Well, and that's where we get the runtime too. This is a long movie.
Oh yeah, it's like almost 2.5 hours.
Yeah. The arriving in England could have been the opening very easily.
Yeah. You could have cut. I mean, they do like use the baseball game like later in the movie and stuff. But I think you could have rewritten that whole opening section. Well,
and in retrospect on this recent watch, if I had like two major complaints, complaint number one, the Tinkerbell love thing doesn't play.
It's so weird. It kind of comes out of nowhere.
Yeah. And like Julia Roberts is like, I think this might have been my first like movie crush. For anyone listening that doesn't know me, I'm dating a woman with short brunette hair who is like bubbly, like this version of Tinkerbell. So I have a type, is what I'm saying. So that all worked for me. But then when she turns into Cinderella is the punchline. When she turns into like her like big romantic version, she reminds me more of Cinderella than Tinkerbell.
Yeah, and honestly, she, aside from bringing him to Neverland, I feel like she doesn't do a lot towards the plot of the film other than like, well, it's Tinkerbell, we have to have her.
See, I would agree with you overall, except for she's the impetus to the 3-day countdown, the
That's true.
ticking clock for a movie that is not caring about time, the ticking clock of the movie.
Yeah, which I guess is something you could have just written differently, but that is kind of her, yeah, pretty much she is a very important part, bringing him there and getting the events put into motion. And then she just kind of takes a back seat. Like none of the Lost Boys seem to really interact with her either.
Yeah.
Like even when she's talking to them, they're almost ignoring her.
Yeah, like they trust her word, because that's what converts is it Pockets? I think it's the one. I used to know all their names for a minute, but I can't remember anymore.
Thudbud is the only one I remember.
Thud is Thud has the best joke of the movie, which is Toodles really lost his marbles.
Oh yeah, he's my favorite Lost Boy, honestly.
Toodles
he's
or
so
Thud?
much Thudbud. He is so fun. Like he's just this just very portly kid, just laughing around at everything, and him like rolling into a ball and rolling down the stairs to knock over pirates.
I don't know what the number is, but I would pay an inordinate amount of money for whatever stuffed ball they turned into Thudbutt that rolls down the gangway. I don't know what prop that is, but I need that prop.
Oh, it's amazing. Like I was just like, what is going on in this movie at that point?
Well, and I think retrospectively, and actually I'm coming to this decision as we're talking. I love absurdism, and Thud might have been the domino that fell that made me love absurdism, because the whole final act of this movie is absurd.
Yeah, it's just literally throwing everything at the wall in this giant battle between children and giant male pirates.
And it all works.
Yeah, it does. I do have multiple questions about what is the colorful substance that they're eating and throwing and just shooting out of everything. Everything is just bright colored, and I don't know what it's supposed to be.
The neon aesthetic thing, I don't know. Like, to answer your question, I don't know. I think it was all dyed mashed potatoes for the food fight.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought.
Yeah, just to be specific. But yeah, the 4-way cannon that shoots 4 different colors. I don't know. It's just awesome.
Yeah, it's just a lot of like colorful paint going around.
I think that's like, if I were Spielberg, I would pin that down as like, oh, that is like liquefied imagination. That is literally like the blood of Neverland, if I had to pick. But great question. Don't have an answer.
Yeah, it's something I always thought about, even as a kid, is like, oh, why are the mashed potatoes colored?
Did any sequence stick out to you as like just the leader of the movie, like the reason to jump in and watch it?
Like in retrospect, after watching the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the last 20 minutes, I thought, like the whole battle sequence, I thought was so much fun. And it reminded me of, which is a movie that's going to be coming up on this podcast, actually, the Power Rangers reboot. Which I really like. And I have very strong opinions about that movie. But I can definitely see people kind of being like, oh, you know, most of it is kind of whatever, blah, blah, blah. I think almost everybody who's seen it will be like, yo, that last 20 minutes, though, is just like insanely awesome, especially if you're like a fan of that stuff. And I was getting the same kind of feeling of like, oh, like just the whole ending here is fun. It like it kind of dipped out of the kids movie thing. Like, and as you said, like there's a difference between kids movies and family movies. Yeah, that was like kind of walking out of it. Like even the parts of the movie that were kind of boring, because as we said, it's a little long. It gets slow at points in the middle. The end kind of made me forget about all of that.
Yeah. The action part of the end. I think this movie has the longest comedy coda of all time, where like as soon as they come back, it's all like magical, but it's magical for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I think that's a negative. I don't 100% know, but it like literally from the point that like they head home after he anoints Thudbutt as the leader of the Lost Boys. From that point until like the actual credits is just it all seems like euphoric in the way that it's done. I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing. I know mentally I check out once Hook is swallowed by the crocodile. Yeah. That's where I'm like, okay, cool. I saw Hook.
Yeah. Which honestly, almost every moment with just Hook and Smee was also just like delightful.
Yes.
Like Dustin Hoffman and Bob Hoskins had great chemistry. And unfortunately Bob Hoskins went on to do Mario Brothers after this, but he is so much fun in this movie. And like Dustin Hoffman is an actor that I've never had like a huge affinity for. But I thought he was a lot of fun as Hook.
He is my quintessential Hook. The 2003, I think, version of Peter Pan.
Which I never saw that one. I saw the like 2016 or whatever one.
Oh, Pan,
which is awful.
Oh boy, we talked about that one on Film Rescue. What a bunch of decisions that were made there.
Having pirates sing Nirvana.
Why not?
It's so weird.
No, there was so there was a 2003 Peter Pan, and the only reason that it sticks in my head is because I was 12 when that came out, which is about the same age that Peter Sumter was, or Jeremy Sumter was, as Peter Pan in that movie, and I had this like existential thing of I didn't understand as a kid that I just wanted to be Peter Pan.
Yeah.
So I hated Jeremy Sumter.
I was a big Peter Pan fan as a kid. Like that was a character I did kind of attach to for a while.
Oh yeah.
I think until I got like I said, I got sick of the animated movie after a while.
And as you grow, the point of like Arrested Development and like being stuck in adolescence starts to wane. I think you're supposed to want to be him as a kid, but the point of his character is to not be him as you grow up.
Yeah. And aren't there like versions where he's actually like the villain? Like I've heard stories of like, oh, there's like versions of Peter Pan where it's actually like he's the one capturing and bringing people to Neverland. I don't know. Maybe this is all bullshit.
No. The only reason I know this is because I accidentally misspoke on the Pan episode and said that Blackbeard wasn't part of Peter Pan's canon. It is part of Peter Pan's canon.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know either until somebody wrote into the show and they were like, "Hey, just to correct you real quick." That sent me into the history, and J.M. Barrie's original Peter Pan is a dick.
Yeah, that's what I thought I heard.
They Disney-fied him in the Disney version and made him like Boy Wonder, more Robin from Batman than he is actually Peter Pan, because in the original books, he brings babies that are left alone back to Neverland, regardless of whether or not their parents are coming back.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And like he throws tantrums. That's a big part of the book, is like Peter Pan's a kid that throws tantrums.
Yeah, he's a kid forever and he's the worst kid.
Yeah. Like he gets mad when Wendy and I think it's kind of in the Disney version, but he gets mad when Wendy like makes the boys wear socks and not go out in the rain, and like she's being motherly and he's resistant to that.
There's definitely a little bit of that in there.
Yeah, in the Disney version that we got. And I think Hook is more a sequel to the books than it is to the Disney movie, because the Arrested Development is so integral to the plot.
Yeah, I think Hook mainly draws from the Disney one from a visual perspective. Like, granted, where the movie takes place and stuff like that will play into that as well. But just the window situation in the bedroom and them flying over Big Ben and stuff like that is very reminiscent of the animated movie.
Oh yeah.
I think like the look of them flying into Neverland, if I recall, is pretty similar to the animated one.
Yeah.
Like, so it like story wise, it might play more from the novels, but visually it totally works as a sequel to the 50s animated.
Which I think is kind of part of the genius too. Like if your Peter Pan sequel works as a sequel to any version of Peter Pan you've ever seen, that's hard to pull off.
Yeah,
I would assume.
Yeah, and I'm a sucker for like late sequels that like kind of get it right.
Yeah,
on like that where they pay attention to stuff like that.
I this is like probably a topic for a different podcast, but the 2009 prequel to The Thing, I'm a staunch.
I just watched that for the first time like a day ago.
Oh, perfect. I'm a staunch defender of that movie.
I think it's good.
I don't know if you know the backstory there, but
yeah.
long story short was they replaced real effects with CGI.
Yeah, and like they had to do it very quickly because the studio last minute was kind of like, no, like we don't like this, just do it CGI or whatever.
Right. So somewhere there exists a cut of the movie that is probably perfect.
Yeah, because that's really the only real complaint I would have on it. And even the CGI is not terrible, but it's just like it doesn't, like, knowing that practical effects exist really just kind of take it back a notch.
Well, and coming off of the original Thing, which is all practical, I think that's a break in aesthetics, which is not forgivable in that sense.
Yeah, well, that might have to be a future episode for us.
I will totally come back. Absolutely. But Hook-wise, I think I'm a big defender. And again, I do not think the movie is perfect. I don't want anyone to misrepresent what I think. I think the movie is good. We say this all the time on Montressor Media stuff. When Spielberg's phoning it in, it's still a C+.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like what's a Spielberg movie I just like hate, and out of the ones I've seen, I don't think there is one.
Like Ready Player One is the only movie I'm actively not trying to see again. But even then, I'm like, yeah, C+. You give me the Iron Giant again, so I can't cry, you know?
Yeah, I didn't see that one.
It's fine. I'm also not a big fan of the book that it's adapted from, so I feel like it's stepped up overall.
From most people, from what I've heard, is it's actually better than the book because it's not actually a good book.
Well, because the book is gatekeeping the book.
Yeah,
that's all.
Believe it or not, the last Spielberg movie I watched was Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which I will say I don't hate.
You know, I've also come around on that one. I don't love it. But the things I used to hate are not the things I hate anymore.
Yeah, like my one takeaway from that movie is like, oh, every scene, like action scene, just does one thing too many.
Yeah.
Like it's not enough that a truck falls off a cliff. It's got to land on a tree, and then it's got to fall into a waterfall, and then it's got to land in a bunch of ants. Like it's like, okay, you could cut one of these things.
Right. The Shia LaBeouf of all of it, I've totally come around.
That never bothered me. The alien stuff never bothered me.
See, the alien stuff, I love the idea. I don't like the execution.
I can agree with that. Like the idea of aliens is fine, though they could have done it better.
Yeah,
or I guess technically they're like interdimensional beings or something like that.
Well, yeah, and like Indiana Jones has always been about no religion or spiritual things are real until they are. Yeah. And so that turn feels correct to me.
Yeah, and like I'm not gonna get bent on a shape about an alien skull being real when the first movie had them find the freaking Ark of the Covenant. Like
exactly.
Like, come on. There was ghosts in that movie that melted people's faces, and you're gonna get mad about aliens?
Sounds like religious bias to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if we're talking about Spielberg when he's off his game, even when he's off, he's fine.
Yeah.
I don't think any of his movies deserve a 29%. Even if anybody involved, him, Robin Williams, anybody that like actively said it's a disappointment, it's like, yeah, sure, probably, but it impacted me a ton as a kid, enough that at 20 years later, I'm here to defend the movie.
Yeah, and
unironically.
I do challenge anybody who maybe hasn't seen it in a while to watch it and be like, tell me you didn't walk away with good memories of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I will certainly tell you, like, hey, there's maybe a good 30-minute chunk in the middle that might slow you down a little bit, but if by the end of that movie you're not just like sitting there with a smile on your face, then I don't know who you are.
Yeah, yeah. It's so heartwarming. It's so well presented. Um, Initially, I think it was supposed to just be a Peter Pan movie proper, and then the choice to make it a sequel, or a sequel idea, because it does kind of exist on its own. It's like it exists in that weird in between place that Tinkerbell talks about at the end, where you're dreaming, but you haven't totally woken up yet. It feels like the whole movie exists there in this place of like, I know it's connected to everything Peter Pan, but even if I was an alien who knew nothing about Peter Pan, I would watch this movie and go, oh, that's a villain. That's a hero. That's a hero's journey. These are the good guys. These are the bad guys. Like there's all that separation and like direct stuff. It functions on its own to me.
Yeah, I do wonder if this movie's greatest victim of itself is its length, because it is a little too long.
Yeah, the training sequence is it's monotonous to start. It crests at a great point. The food fight is probably the most memorable part of this movie for anyone.
Oh yeah, it was the thing I remembered the most going in.
Yeah. I think all of that works, but then from the food fight into the baseball game, which on its own is really fun, into like the I called it the BVS scene. Peter Pan walks into his childhood home where he lived with John, Michael, and Wendy, and basically just like shows us the prequel for a minute.
Yeah, that was weird. I totally forgot there was, like, you see young Pan in this movie.
Yeah, you see him at different stages in life too.
Yeah,
and the existential horror of bless Maggie Smith, bless her for sure. But the turn from Gwyneth Paltrow to Maggie Smith as Peter Pan has aged or gone through her age is like, as a kid, horrified me, and as an adult, I was like, "Ooh, this is almost Cronenberg kind of levels."
Yeah. It is interesting though, like seeing the young Pan. I was like, oh, he looks like a good Peter Pan. Almost makes me wish they just made a live action Peter Pan with those people.
Well, and I would totally watch that. I would watch Robin Williams as Hook as much as I love Dustin Hoffman.
Oh,
and
that'd be
love
fun.
him. Robin Williams as Hook would be so much fun.
Yeah. But yeah, I did love Dustin Hoffman, especially like all the stuff with like the clocks and stuff. And
yeah,
like I love the giant fucking crocodile in the middle of the town. Like that was always a thing I remembered, is the crocodile falling on him. Like that stuff sticks with you.
I'm on recent watch, I think my favorite scene of the whole movie is Hook has an epiphany to commit suicide.
Oh my god, yeah, that was another moment where I was like, what is this rating?
This is a PG movie, my guy.
It's so weird. It does not feel like a PG movie.
It doesn't. It's pushing the line. There's prostitutes in this movie.
Yeah, there 1,000% is.
I love how hard it could push the line by never expressly saying anything, because Hook never says I'm going to kill myself. He says I'm going to end my life.
He does use the word suicide.
Yeah,
he says something about being suicidal. That's like the closest you get.
And then the switch over, I think, is my favorite part of that scene, from like, don't try to stop me, Smee, don't try to stop me, to try to stop me, Smee, please.
Yeah, why aren't you stopping me?
And the switch over from that into Smee gets an apostrophe.
Yeah.
and that's like the rest of the movie. Like literally the movie sets everything up and then runs to that point, and then it says, so from here on out, Hook is trying to win the kids over while Peter Pan is pulling a Rocky. And that's it.
Yeah, and I actually enjoy that, because I forgot. I was like, oh, what does Hook do in this movie? Like, while Peter Pan's away. And I kind of like the idea of like, oh, we're going to turn his kids against him. And that kid who plays Jack, what was his name? Charlie Korsmo, I think.
Oh, man. Yeah, Charlie Korsmo.
Yeah, like I was like, oh, like what else have I seen him in? And I always forget he was in What About Bob, which is a great movie.
Oh, I misspoke earlier. Dante Bosco is who I was talking about for the Asian American representation for Rufio.
Yeah.
I said Charlie Korsmo. I did not mean that. I got them
Oh.
flipped in my head.
Yeah, I think I missed that as well. But yeah, because like I knew I had seen him before, and then he did because he hasn't. I looked him up. He didn't do many movies. His last movie I think was in 2018, and before that was 1998, and a movie that I really like that has some problematic stuff nowadays, but Can't Hardly Wait, which was like a coming of age movie that featured a lot of actors before they were stars, like Jennifer Love Hewitt, Seth Green.
Oh yeah, I remember that movie.
Lauren Ambrose, I think, the girl who was in 6 Feet Under.
Yeah,
it features like a ton of people, but he's like the nerdy kid in that movie.
Can't Hardly Wait was like the blueprint for American Pie.
Yeah, it's still funny and still pretty great to this day. But it's definitely got a couple moments like, oh, probably wouldn't do that nowadays. But
yeah, well, comedy's never going to age well. I'm fine with that now. I'm just getting onto that boat.
Yeah, it doesn't like affect my enjoyment of it, but it's just one of those things like, oh yeah, we got to talk about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Ethan Embry was also like the main character in that movie.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really fun. But yeah, he was in that. And it like as soon as I read that, I pictured him in my head like, oh my God, that's totally the same kid.
That's true. I really liked him in this movie too. I think his best performance is in the airplane, when he switches from fucking with his dad trying to break the window of the airplane into accidentally dropping the oxygen masks, and his laugh is so like forced, but it felt right for the scene where he's like it's like maniacal laughter, and I'm like, oh yeah, he's gonna be Hook's kid later. That makes sense here.
Yeah, and he's such a good like kid actor. Like between this and What About Bob, I'm surprised he didn't do more movies as a kid. Like maybe he just didn't want to. But
sure,
it's interesting to see he had like such a short like filmography. He did something in 2018, but I was even trying to see like, well, maybe has he been like a producer on stuff, but I wasn't really seeing anything.
No, I think he's one of those people that just like jumped out of the business for a while. Rick Moranis was the other one, right? Like,
yeah,
uncontactable Rick Moranis, and then
he's coming back.
Well, because his kids are grown now, so
yeah,
he doesn't have to worry about them. I think that's smart for any one within Hollywood of like, if you want to protect your kids, jump out of movies for a little bit. That's probably a good idea.
Yeah. I would mad respect for anybody who's just like, nah, I'm good.
Exactly. Yeah. Man, I'm trying to think. There's so many great sequences, but the sum of the parts still just stands out. It's 1991, guys. Like, this is 30 years ago.
Oh, I'm so old.
Give it, and like I know I am blinded by nostalgia goggles on this thing, but even watching it critically, the things that I'm picking apart are like weird decisions and extra scenes, but plot wise, I have no issues.
I think it holds up like pretty well. Like some of the special effects even are pretty good. Like the compositing of Tink in most scenes looks pretty nice.
Yeah.
Like him flying has some pretty clear like green screen stuff, but it's not bad.
Well, and specifically during the final action scene, the wire work looks like
really good.
It looks like wire work, but it also isn't there. So it feels like the most idealized version of a stage play.
Yeah. And like, so the way they have him doing like multiple flips in and out of the scene, like it's really well done. Like for wire work that was wire work watching it, it still kind of makes you forget about it.
Yeah.
And interesting. I didn't know about the stage play thing. That kind of puts like a different spin on it.
Peter Pan continues as a stage play. It'll never not be a stage play because that was the closest thing to movies they had back when J.M. Barrie was writing this stuff. Like they had, I think 1924, they did a Peter Pan silent film. But I think it was like 1911 when he was initially writing this stuff. So like movies wasn't an idea. Stage play was the closest thing you could do, and that has continued forever. And that inspired the reason why this doesn't look like it's shot on location. And I would argue the movie would suffer if it looked like it was shot on location.
Yeah, I like that Neverland looks unique.
Yeah.
Like it should. It's a special magical place. Like if it just looked like we were filming in like California or something, I wouldn't really be into it.
If it looked like Pirates of the Caribbean, I would probably be more aware of the cheesier trappings of the movie.
Yeah. Like at times when I was watching it, because I recently watched the Muppet, what is it? The pirate one?
Yes! Muppet Treasure Island.
Yes, I just watched it for the first time recently. Because I have seen bits and pieces of a lot of the Muppet movies, but there are some I just have never seen all the way through. So I recently watched Muppet Christmas Carol and Muppet Treasure Island.
Oh, wow.
And Muppet Treasure Island was a lot of fucking fun. And I was definitely watching this movie and thinking at times like, oh, this also feels like a Muppet could walk by on screen and it wouldn't be out of place.
100% correct. You are absolutely right there. Yeah, the Treasure Island theme. So, okay, my media company, Montressor Media, is named after the Montressor spaceport from Treasure Planet, which is just Treasure Island in space.
Yeah.
So that's all near and dear to me. So maybe there's extra nostalgia on why I want to love Hook, because it's like, yeah, this feels related. This feels like the cousin to all of that.
Yeah, straight up. If Rizzo was there, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Dude, Gonzo could show up as one of the Lost Boys and be like, yep, that makes sense.
They should have did Muppet Peter Pan.
I'm pulling for Muppet anything at this point.
Yeah.
Like 10 years ago, I had this idea to redo Pulp Fiction with Muppets.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Wouldn't it?
There's that Twitter trend that goes around all the time where it's like, oh, like redo a movie, you keep one actor, but everybody else is Muppets. And some of the ideas are so great. See,
the reason I do Pulp Fiction, most people would do Samuel L. Jackson is himself surrounded by Muppets. I'm in the camp of Uma Thurman is the only one that remains.
That'd be hilarious.
And then everyone else is Muppets.
Seeing a Muppet have to jab a needle into her.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel like I'm running out of points here. Besides, I really love Hook. It's better than 50%. It's definitely not 100%.
No.
If you had to nail down an approximate deserved number,
I feel like I'm in the 65-70 range, somewhere in there. I could maybe be talked into as high as a 75. I think there's a lot of heavy lifting by the cast, and they're doing a phenomenal job.
Totally.
Especially Dustin Hoffman and Bob Hoskins. But Jim Carrey, Robin Williams is great when he finally gets to be Robin Williams.
Oh yeah.
And, everything else is just he's doing what he needs to do. The kids are really good, although I will say the daughter doesn't really get to do much at all.
Yeah, kind of. I don't know what the decision was there besides extra stakes.
Yeah.
And maybe there was a cut subplot. I don't know.
Maybe, but it really should have just been one kid, it feels like.
Yeah, it does feel that way.
Because even when he talks about his happy thought, he doesn't mention the daughter at all. It's just like, oh, you were my happy thought.
My happy thought was my son.
Yeah.
Fuck my daughter. She's awful.
Yeah. But I think it's fun. The music's great. Like John Williams, hardly ever misses, if ever. Really enjoy it. I'd be curious to see what it would have been like if they went the musical route. Honestly, I think that could have been a better movie, but that's not the movie we got.
It would be 3 hours if we got the movie proper with musical numbers, which I'm not opposed to. But yeah, it would definitely be. I could see the musical version of this being 29%.
Yeah,
if the music dragged the movie down that far.
I'd love to hear those songs. Like apparently they exist. They're out there.
Yeah, I'd absolutely listen to that. Robin Williams is not a singer.
No, I mean he did all right in Aladdin.
Well, yeah, and a lot of that is there's a German expression for what he did. It's called Sprechtischem. Sprechtischem, wherever they roll their R. I don't know. I don't speak German well. I just know music theory. Sprechtischem is spoken singing is
Yeah.
the idea. Opera does it all the time, where it's like you have to deliver lines, but you have to do it melodically. You don't have to sing well as long as you're on key. You just have to deliver the information, and that's kind of what he did in Aladdin.
Yeah, and half of his singing is also done in voices as well.
Exactly.
So makes sense.
And there is musicality to doing impressions. So like it's not shocking for an impressionist to be able to sing. They can match voices, they can match notes. It kind of all ties together.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Where it sits right now, gun to my head, I would give this a 72%.
Okay.
It's not quite a B. B minus maybe, depending on how happy you're feeling that day. It's definitely not a 29%.
No, that is just, it's kind of insane to me. And like I'd be curious to dig into old reviews just to see if everybody was just echoing like fucking Ebert and Robert or whatever.
From what I saw, and this probably won't be shocking, but the reviews for this movie have the same feeling as the later 2010 reboot Fever, which is like, why do we have to keep revisiting things from our past? Let's do something new. It's that idea, but they didn't have reboots as a like thing to focus on. So the focus is like, we already know Peter Pan. We don't need to know Peter Pan too. So like they're voicing an argument that would come along later, which is like rightful in some aspects, but
yeah. I mean, we all went through that phase of like, oh, don't remake movies, but I was broken from that eventually. And I'll tell you the one that broke it was Robocop. Because I'm a huge Robocop fan. Like I've told the story many times, but I lived in a very small town where everybody knew everybody. So everybody knew who my parents were. So I would walk down to our local video store by myself when I was like 5 and rent Robocop and then bring it home and watch it. And nobody cared. So like I have a lot of love for Robocop. But like the reboot, I was like, you know what? This is kind of fine. Like I like it. It's just a different thing. And that was the one that kind of broke me of like, you know what? It doesn't take away from the original. It's still there. I just hope the remake is also good.
That mindset of like rebooting hurts the original, I fully reject that. That's not real. That is you applying something to a movie that the movie isn't asking for.
Yeah. Maybe if you were to argue a sequel could hurt a movie if they retcon some shit. But then I can just ignore that.
I would still argue that the retcons are the fault of the movie, not the fault of the original.
Yeah.
I don't think movies exist in a vacuum, but like I do think you can't hurt an original movie beyond just like actively trying to resent it in your sequel, reboot, or whatever. I think where I land is like reboots for IP sake are never worth it. Reboots for artistic sake are always worth it, even if they're bad. As long as someone was swinging for the thing they loved, I'll forgive all of that.
Yeah. And like I love more like soft reboots where like it's technically a sequel, but we're kind of doing something similar. Like what Force Awakens was. Like that is its own movie, but it is also a New Hope at the same time.
Yeah. Spiritual successor. I say this all the time on our shows. I love a spiritual successor. I love before we were recording, we were talking about Returnal for PS5. It's a game, and Returnal feels like Metroid without retreading Metroid. So I'm getting all the same flavors, but in a new context, a new way, and that I'm always on board for, because spiritual successor means that the original artist was respected and adored into the new property, whatever that be.
Yeah, I agree with that. And like how we were talking, like there was some campaign to just like shit on this movie like a year or so ago. I wish I had seen it again around that time, because I may have like defended this a bit.
Yeah.
Like hearing that it was, oh, we're kind of what we're hearing now, like, oh, sequels, reboots, blah, 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 back in 1991 or whatever. Like, that's crazy that we're literally just caught in this loop.
We really are.
and people still act like it's a new thing.
Yeah, it's not like we have new ways to recontextualize ideas, but the complaints are that's always going to happen. Let's talk again in 2040 and tell me that like there isn't a version of reboot culture being shit on.
Yeah.
Like it's going to happen.
Yeah, and guess what? Disney's working on a fucking another Peter Pan right now. So
yeah, well, and like what is it, the Amazon MGM deal? We're going to see 1,000 MGM reboots. Strap in. Some of them are going to suck. Some of them are going to be great because the people they hired to do it want to do that job.
Yeah, I'm going to be I actually wanted to dive into the MGM library just to see what they just acquired. And like I don't even know what's up with James Bond nowadays cuz Sony put out the last few and I don't know who's putting out the new one. Like are those still owned by MGM? I think they are.
Yeah, I have no idea. Last night we were talking about if James Bond is part of the MGM deal, Amazon needs to do a Logan version of James Bond with Michael Caine as James Bond as an older man.
Yeah.
That's it. If I get that, the deal's worth it to me.
Yeah. I want like a James Bond period piece. Like give me like 4 movies set in the 60s.
Yeah, I could see that. James Bond 1776. He's working for the British but has to come to America on a boat.
Oh, I'd be into that.
That could be super fun.
Oh, apparently they have Rocky.
That sounds right. I mean, the Rocky series is still kind of going strong with Creed though, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think Creed 2 was less well received than Creed 1, but still did super well. I didn't see the second one, so
interesting.
I mean, it says they still have James Bond, but this is Wikipedia, so who knows?
Who knows? I think that's all my points. It's Spielberg, so it's at least fine. It's Robin Williams, so get nostalgic. It's Dustin Hoffman just hamming it up scene to scene.
Yeah.
Every scene he's in is fantastic.
Every scene he's in is the best scene of the movie, in my opinion.
And that's why it deserves the title Hook and not Peter Pan 2.
Yeah, it is his movie. Like, even though he doesn't have as much screen time, he is certainly stealing the show.
100%. I don't know. If people want to get at me and tell me 73 is too high, that's fine.
I think that tracks.
Sub 50 is where I'll fight. 51 and up, sure, I'll take anything. Sub 50, I'm sorry, you're wrong. That's just, it's not possible for this kind of talent.
No, and you know, it's slow but not boring. Like it angers me that it is ranked as low as it is, and for the reasons that it is. I mean, IMDb puts it at a 6.8 out of 10, so they're at least a little higher. But
no arguments there. Yeah, 6.8. I mean, low to me, but overall, I think that's fair.
Yeah. Metacritic at a 52, still a little low.
Yeah, 52. I'm like, I'm ready to fight, but I'm not saying anything yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's worth a revisit. Like that's kind of been the fun part of this podcast is it's the movies people have been picking. It's like, oh, I haven't seen that in forever. Or I haven't seen that at all. So it's been fun to like be forced to kind of revisit these things and coming out of them with more fond memories than I expected.
I think genuinely that is important for anyone who is critiquing film in any way, whether it be with me, which is like, you know, satirical, hypothetical, just like good, fun shit shows, or with you, which is genuine revisits to like see where things still lie and everything in between. I think it's important to visit old movies again because so much about movie making has changed over the years that you're going to reappreciate things in different ways depending on when you visit them. And the further away you get, the more objective you can be. And I think that's more fair. Like I prefer a 2021 review on a 1991 movie over the 1991 review because they didn't know where movies were going to go, but we do now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun like to revisit this stuff and just be like, oh, you know, was it as bad as like I rewatched Passenger 57 recently, which is a movie I saw a lot as a kid, like a Wesley Snipes action film. And I remember loving it. And I'm like watching it now. I'm like, oh, maybe not as good. But It does have an amazing one-liner that is just, hey, we gave this guy the line because he was the black man in the movie, which he's talking to the villain on the phone. And he's like, do you ever play, what is it, roulette or whatever? He's like, well, always bet on black. And I'm like, nothing in this scene has anything to do with gambling. You're literally just delivering a one-liner on the phone, and it's because you're the black guy. And I guess he did an interview and talked about that line too. And he's like, yeah, I didn't understand it because I don't gamble. He's like, oh, I just assumed it was because I was the black guy.
That's hilarious. I love those kind of things.
Yeah, it's so dumb. But all right, I guess we can wrap up here. I feel like we've said everything there is to say about Hook.
Totally.
Definitely recommend revisiting it. It's 2.5 hours. I was weary that like, oh, I'm gonna get bored, aren't I? And I didn't. So nice little piece of nostalgia.
Sorry, give me just 1 second. I'll be right back.
Okay.
So sorry. The cat was vomiting. I thought it was worse, but it was just a hairball.
Oh yeah, that's very familiar.
Last thing you said was a good piece of nostalgia.
Yeah. But so I guess we can wrap up here. Guys, I'm just gonna have to edit this.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I thought I knew where I was jumping back into, but well, do you just want to tell us where everyone can find you online then?
Yeah, absolutely. So hey, if you disagree with my Hook takes, you're wrong, first of all. But if you want to argue, you can find me at Seth X Decker on most social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, the whole shebang. From there, I mentioned it a few times slyly, but this time openly, I host a podcast called The Film Rescue Show. Jeremy, you've been on that show before.
I have.
What we do there is we take movies and pitch hypothetical alternative versions. You and I talked about a wonderful film.
I love it.
That was Lockdown. I was going to say Locked Out. Lockdown.
Yeah, it's a very generic title. I have to like pause before it's either Lockdown or Lockout, but yeah, it is Lockdown.
Yes,
Guy Pearce.
Yes, the not a John Carpenter movie.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, we take movies like that and then we pitch different versions just for fun. It's a great time. It's open to guests, so anyone who's listening to this, you could be a guest if you have a movie you can pick out.
Yeah, it's fun. I love the show and I love being on it.
We're kind of stinkers on it. Anyone leaving this and how positive we are here, expect negativity on Film Rescue, but also know that it's all from a good place. We don't actively hate. Yeah, we don't actively hate anything. We wouldn't be watching the movies if we didn't at least enjoy the hook, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Hook.
Haha. Yeah, and I know I'm kicking around a few comeback movies on there. So,
oh, we're ready. Season 6 kicks off in July. Love to have you back. That would be a great time.
Oh yeah, I'm ready.
Nice.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on and doing this. I think we already kind of hinted at maybe some other movies we can come talk about.
Yeah, so totally.
Definitely going to have you back.
Thank you for having me. I will absolutely talk about any movie that I loved previously that people still hate. I honestly, I love like fighting for movies. I could defend The Room if I had to.
Some of the movies that people have picked, because I had Erin on here and she, we did Pride and Prejudice and then she hinted at the next movie she wants to do. And I looked it up. I'm just like, oh boy, this is going to be a trip.
That sounds like Erin.
Yeah. And then I know somebody already recommended The Fountain by Darren Aronofsky. I'm just like, oh, what are you doing to me?
Oh man, that's one I have not visited yet. I saw Mother ! Before I saw The Fountain.
I have not seen Mother yet. I do want to though.
It's if you grew up any kind of religious, you're going to get something out of it. If you if you didn't, it is aggressively itself.
Yeah, I'm familiar with like everything about it, and I'm familiar with Aronofsky being Aronofsky, so it's going to be an interesting visit.
He is he's the artist version of Christian Bale. I think they look like the same person.
They kind of do. Oh, that's funny. All right, well, we're definitely gonna have you back. We might hit up the thing at some point.
Sounds good.
But, all right, man. Well, I just want to thank you for stopping by, and I want to urge everyone to check out your podcast. Hit you up on the social medias. You're a fun follow on top of it. So,
well, I mean, if you're not here for my hot takes, you're here for my hot ass pics.
Woo!
That's all I do on Twitter.
That's what it's for. That's what I heard.
Exactly.
Like that in Snapchat.
Yeah.
But all right. So thank you for stopping by, and thank everybody for listening.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
All right. And we'll see you again.